Imagine this. It's midnight in a medieval castle, somewhere in the heart of Europe. The winter winds are howling outside, rattling against towering stone walls. The courtyard is coated in frost, and even the moat is beginning to freeze over. Inside, the corridors echo with silence, but also with cold, bone-deep, merciless cold. Now picture yourself in a massive, dark chamber. The ceiling looms so high above you that even candlelight doesn't reach it. The walls drip with condensation. The floor is bare stone. You pull a heavy wool blanket around your body, but still, your teeth chatter. There's a fire burning in the hearth, but you quickly realize the fire is useless. The warmth vanishes the moment you step a few feet away. So how did people survive? How did men, women, children, nobles, servants, and even kings manage to sleep in these icy fortresses without freezing to death? Tonight, we're going to uncover the chilling truth. But before we descend deeper into this frozen nightmare of history, let me ask you a quick question. Where are you watching this from right now? And what's the temperature where you are? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to compare your cozy modern night to what medieval people endured. And hey, if you love uncovering the darker, stranger sides of history, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon. Because trust me, the secrets we're about to reveal will change the way you look at castles forever. Now, let's step back into the cold. We often imagine medieval castles as majestic places, towering keeps, glittering halls, roaring feasts. Movies and fantasy novels have tricked us into seeing them as cozy fortresses filled with tapestries, glowing fires, and luxurious chambers. The reality? Very different. Castles were not designed for comfort. They were machines of war. Their purpose was defense, not luxury. Thick stone walls kept invaders out, but they also trapped the cold in. Stone is a terrible insulator. In summer, it absorbs heat, keeping rooms cool. In winter, it becomes an icy sponge that radiates cold back into the air. Medieval people didn't have central heating, no insulated windows, no double glazing. Just stone, wood, iron, and whatever fabrics they could layer on top. Even the richest noble in Europe, sleeping in the grandest bed, was still fighting the cold every single night. Let's take a moment to walk through the structure of a medieval castle bedroom. The Great Hall. In many castles, especially earlier ones, the bedroom wasn't private at all. Entire households, servants, knights, nobles, even the Lord himself, often slept in or near the Great Hall. Fires blazed here, but smoke filled the air, and the heat dissipated quickly. Chambers. As time went on, lords and ladies began to have their own private chambers. But these rooms were enormous. We're talking about spaces larger than modern apartments, with ceilings 20 to 30 feet high. Heat rose and disappeared into the rafters. Windows. Windows were small slits, designed more for archers than for sunlight. Most had no glass at all until later centuries, just wooden shutters. When those shutters were closed, the room was dark and damp. When they were open, icy drafts cut through the chamber like knives. Floors, stone, always stone, sometimes covered with straw, rushes, or, for the wealthy, woven rugs. But in winter, that stone floor acted like a block of ice beneath your feet. So imagine trying to sleep here. Your bed might be carved wood with a canopy overhead, but the air would be so frigid that your breath fogged the room. Your blankets were heavy wool or fur, but unless you layered them high enough, they barely kept out the cold. And here is something most people dawned to realize. Medieval castles weren't just cold at night. They were always cold. The temperature inside rarely rose much higher than outside, except in the immediate glow of a fire. You're probably thinking, well, they had fireplaces. Problem solved. Not so fast. Fires in medieval castles were both a blessing and a curse. Blessing. They provided localized heat and light. A hearth fire could keep a small circle warm, dry out damp clothes, and create a sense of comfort. Curse, they were inefficient. Heat rose immediately, disappearing into the rafters. The stone walls absorbed what little warmth was left. Unless you were sitting right in front of the flames, you were still shivering. And there was another problem: smoke. Early medieval hearths often had no proper chimneys. Instead, smoke vented out through holes in the roof or slits in the walls. Rooms filled with a choking haze. Your eyes watered, your lungs burned, and the smell clung to your clothes and bedding. So yes, you might get a bit of warmth, but at the cost of breathing in smoke all night. Here's one of the most practical ways people fought the cold. They slept together. The wealthy had giant beds, often designed to hold entire families or multiple servants. It wasn't unusual for a lord and lady to share their bed with children, attendants, or favored retainers. The heat of multiple bodies under heavy blankets created a human furnace. Servants and soldiers did the same. In the great hall, dozens of people would huddle together on straw pallets, wrapped in cloaks, pressed shoulder to shoulder. It wasn't about comfort or privacy. It was survival. And here's where we get a little glimpse into the psychology of the Middle Ages. Today, we treasure sleeping alone in a private, warm bed. Back then, solitude was a luxury and a dangerous one. If you were alone in a freezing chamber, you were at far greater risk of falling ill or even freezing during the night. Togetherness was life-saving. Another defense: sleeping in clothes. Forget the modern image of pajamas or sleeping in comfort. Medieval people often went to bed fully dressed, or nearly so. Linen undergarments, wool tunics, thick socks, and even cloaks were worn straight to bed. In fact, medieval records suggest that undressing completely for sleep was seen as strange or even unsafe. Why expose your body to the cold when layers were your best defense? The wealthy added furs, fox, rabbit, even ermine for the richest nobles. Servants piled on whatever scraps they had. Everyone understood one thing: your bed was just one layer of protection. Your clothing was another. Now, here's where medieval ingenuity really shines. Beds weren't just beds. They were microclimates. The classic four-poster bed with heavy curtains wasn't about decoration. It was survival. Those curtains trapped body heat, creating a pocket of warmth inside, even when the rest of the room was freezing. Imagine it like this. You climb into bed, pull fur blankets over your body, then draw thick wool curtains around the entire frame. Suddenly, your bed becomes a small heated chamber. The air inside might be 20 degrees warmer than the icy room beyond. This was especially crucial in noble households, where chambers were enormous and impossible to heat fully. The bed was your fortress inside the fortress. Even with fires, clothing, and bed curtains, the truth is simple. Medieval people were always cold in winter. They accepted it as part of life. They didn't expect comfort the way we do. Cold was as natural as hunger or fatigue. Chronic chills shaped their habits, their health, and even their worldview. And here's the chilling part. Literally, illness was linked to the cold. Medieval medicine, based on humors, taught that cold air caused disease. Physicians advised against sleeping alone or in damp, drafty rooms. But of course, the reality was unavoidable. Cold wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Now, before we push deeper into how medieval people fought this nightly battle with cold, let me pause and ask, if you had to sleep in one of these freezing stone rooms, how do you think you'd survive? Would you huddle with others? Pile on every blanket you own? Or build a fire and risk the smoke? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your strategy. And hey, if you're enjoying this journey into the dark, freezing heart of the Middle Ages, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're only getting started. Because in the next section, you'll see just how far people went, from heated stones to animal furs to bizarre sleeping rituals, all to avoid freezing to death in their own castles. So, picture it. the night deepens. The winds outside grow fiercer. Inside your medieval chamber, the fire dies low, the drafts creep back in, and your breath clouds in front of you. You curl tighter under the blankets, curtains drawn, hoping you'll wake up in the morning. But survival wasn't just about luck. It was about innovation. And in part 2, we'll explore the ingenious and sometimes shocking methods medieval people used to fight the cold and survive the night. The cold wasn't a temporary inconvenience in the Middle Ages. It was a permanent, gnawing presence. Winter could last months, with snow piling against castle walls, rivers freezing solid, and storms cutting people off from the outside world. To survive this season inside a castle was not about luxury. It was about art. The art of layering, adapting, and inventing ways to keep death at bay while you slept. In part 1, we explored the architecture, the fires, the bed curtains, and the communal sleeping habits. But the truth is, those measures were just the beginning. Medieval people developed an entire arsenal of tricks and rituals to endure the long, frozen nights. One of the cleverest tools was the heated stone. Here's how it worked. A large, smooth stone or brick would be placed in the hearth until it was blazing hot. Then, using tongs, it was wrapped in cloth or placed inside a wooden pan with a lid. This improvised heater was tucked into the bed an hour before sleep. The result? The sheets were no longer icy. Instead, they radiated gentle warmth. But there was a risk. Too hot, and the stone could scorch the bedding, or worse, start a fire. Too cool, and the comfort vanished in minutes. It was a delicate balance, and families passed down tricks for how long to heat the stones, how many layers of cloth to wrap them in, and where to place them. Later, in wealthier households, metal bed warmers became common. These were pans with long handles, filled with glowing embers from the hearth. They were slid between the sheets to heat the bed directly. Imagine the smell of scorched linen, a hiss of sparks, the danger of embers setting your mattress alight, all for a few minutes of warmth. It was dangerous, but when the alternative was shivering all night, many thought it worth the risk. Cloth blankets were essential, but if you could afford it, nothing compared to fur. Fox, wolf, bear, beaver, and even ermine were used as coverings. Furs were heavy, dense, and excellent at trapping heat. A noble bed might be piled with layers of fur, so thick you could barely move underneath. And yet, there was also symbolism in furs. Certain animals, ermine, sable, mink, were restricted by law to the nobility, reserved as signs of rank. To sleep beneath ermine fur was not just to stay warm, but to proclaim your power. Meanwhile, the poor relied on sheepskin, goatskin, or whatever they could scavenge. The contrast between noble fur-lined beds and peasant straw pallets was stark, but the goal was always the same: survive the night. Not everyone could afford fine wool or heavy blankets. For the majority, warmth came from nature itself. Peasants in castles, guards, cooks, servants, often slept on straw pallets stuffed into sacks of coarse linen. Over time, the straw compacted and lost its fluff, so it was changed every few weeks. The smell of old straw was pungent, mixed with sweat, smoke, and dampness. Rushes, long grasses were also used. Spread across the floor, they created insulation against the icy stone. Some were sprinkled with herbs like lavender, thyme, or mint to mask the odor and keep insects at bay. And here's something fascinating. Hay was often heaped directly over sleepers. Families would burrow beneath it, like animals nesting in a barn. Archaeological evidence shows that in some regions, this method was common during the harshest winters, especially among the poorest. The castle may have been built for defense, but its servants slept like cattle, literally under piles of straw. Sleeping together wasn't only about warmth. It was about trust, status, and even politics. In noble households, being invited to share a bed with the lord or lady was an honor. Ambassadors, allies, even rival nobles might sleep beside their hosts as a sign of goodwill. It sounds strange to us, but bed sharing was a political tool. For servants, sharing a bed was practical. 2 or 3 bodies generated more heat than one. Families often crammed into a single bed, parents in the middle, children on either side. It was survival, but it also reinforced the bonds of kinship. Yet there was a darker side. In crowded halls, with dozens of bodies pressed close, disease spread rapidly. Fleas, lice, and skin infections thrived in these communal sleeping arrangements. The warmth kept you alive in the short term, but it could kill you in the long run. Another trick, head coverings. A medieval saying went, "If your head be warm, the rest will follow." And it was true. People wore nightcaps, woolen hats, hoods, or even full cloth cowls to bed. Children wore them, nobles wore them, kings wore them. Without one, you'd wake with frozen ears and aching sinuses. Clothing was layered obsessively. A noble might sleep in a linen shirt, woolen hose, thick socks, a padded tunic, and then wrap in furs and blankets. The poor simply slept in their day clothes. Changing into sleepwear was a luxury few could afford. You wore what you owned, day and night, until the fabric rotted off. The hearth wasn't just for the evening. Fires were tended through the night, especially in noble chambers. A servant might sleep lightly, rising every few hours to feed the flames. Letting the fire die meant waking in bitter cold. In some castles, braziers, portable metal fire pits were carried into rooms. They glowed like miniature suns, but they came with danger. Carbon monoxide poisoning was a real, if little understood, threat. There are recorded cases of entire families suffocating in their sleep when braziers were left burning in enclosed chambers. Yet for many, it was a risk worth taking. Better to gamble on invisible poison than to freeze to death. Cold shaped the rhythm of medieval life. In winter, people went to bed earlier, rising only when daylight returned. Long hours were spent under the covers, conserving warmth. Tasks that required exposure to the cold, like hunting, collecting firewood, or tending animals, were done quickly and in daylight. The night was reserved for huddling close, conserving heat, and trying to sleep through the cold. Even feasts and social gatherings were affected. In some castles, great halls would host winter banquets not because of celebration, but because it was warmer to gather everyone in one place than to heat multiple chambers. One chilling truth: castles were colder inside than out. The stone walls absorbed and radiated cold, creating a damp, bone-penetrating chill. Travelers often remarked that they would rather camp outside by a fire than spend the night in a drafty chamber. Moisture added to the misery. Condensation froze on walls, frost gathered on window ledges, and water left in buckets iced over by morning. Even wine barrels froze in storerooms, forcing people to chip out chunks of slush to drink. Imagine waking in the middle of the night, your blanket stiff with frost, your breath clouding the air. That was normal in a medieval castle. The constant cold didn't just shape sleep. It shaped the very culture of the Middle Ages. Nobles showed wealth not by staying warm, but by enduring the cold with dignity. To complain was a weakness. Hardship was proof of strength. This stoicism became part of the knightly and aristocratic identity. Religion reinforced it. Suffering was linked to piety. Monks often slept in unheated cells, embracing cold as spiritual discipline. For them, shivering through the night was a form of prayer. Even art reflected this reality. Medieval manuscripts show kings and queens wrapped in cloaks beside giant hearths, while peasants huddle in barns with animals. The cold wasn't hidden. It was central to their world. So as we've seen, sleeping in a medieval castle was a battle. Fires, furs, straw, shared beds, nightcaps, all these were weapons against the cold. And yet, even with them, the cold remained an enemy that never truly left. But what were the long-term effects of this frozen life? How did constant cold shape health, society, and the very way medieval people saw the world? In Part 3, we'll explore the legacy of medieval cold, the diseases it worsened, the resilience it forged, and the surprising innovations it inspired. By now, it's clear that sleeping in a medieval castle was not a romantic fairy tale. It was an act of survival. Every night was a battle against frost, dampness, and bone-chilling winds that turned your chamber into a tomb of stone. But beyond the discomfort, the cold shaped medieval life in deeper, lasting ways. It influenced medicine, diet, religion, and even the way people thought about strength, suffering, and endurance. The night wasn't just when the castle slept. It was when the cold became king. Living in a constant chill left its mark on the human body. Respiratory illnesses, coughs, bronchitis, pneumonia, and even tuberculosis thrived in the damp castle air. Without modern medicine, a winter cold could turn deadly. Many children never lived past their first frozen winters. Arthritis and joint pain were common complaints, worsened by the unrelenting dampness of stone walls. Medieval doctors recognized this link, even if they couldn't explain it scientifically. Remedies often included warm poultices, herbal broths, or sleeping near animals for added body heat. Interestingly, the cold also shaped the idea of humoral medicine. According to Galenic theory, sickness came from an imbalance of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Cold and dampness were thought to increase phlegm. So winter diets included warming foods, spiced wine, roasted meats, garlic, onions, mustard. Sleeping with warm furs wasn't just comfort, it was seen as medical necessity. Food became a weapon against the cold. In summer, peasants might live on vegetables, grains, and bread. But in winter, survival demanded calorie-dense foods. Pork fat, cheese, salted fish, and ale were staples. Nobles feasted on venison, roasted goose, and spiced wine, laced with cinnamon or cloves, imported from faraway lands. Alcohol played a major role. Ale, beer, and mead weren't just recreational drinks. They were warming, filling, and safer than water. Wine was often served hot, infused with herbs and sugar if you were wealthy enough. The act of going to bed after a heavy meal wasn't laziness. It was survival. A full stomach kept the body burning longer through the night, generating precious heat beneath the blankets. Another forgotten trick of medieval survival was co-sleeping with animals. Peasants living near castles often shared barns with livestock during the coldest months. The body heat of cows, sheep, and goats kept the air several degrees warmer. Imagine lying down on a straw pallet while cows shifted and snorted in the dark beside you. Unromantic, but life-saving. Even within castles, dogs and cats were welcomed into chambers. Dogs curled at the foot of beds, acting as living foot warmers. The bond between humans and animals at night was as practical as it was affectionate. The cold wasn't just physical. It shaped psychology. Children raised in freezing halls grew into adults accustomed to hardship. They accepted discomfort as normal, even noble. Complaining about the cold was seen as weakness, especially among warriors and knights. To endure was to prove your worth. This stoicism became part of the medieval worldview. Suffering wasn't just unavoidable, it was honorable. Religion reinforced this. Priests preached that enduring hardship on earth brought spiritual reward. Monks deliberately denied themselves warmth, believing the sting of cold drew them closer to God. The cold wasn't only endured, it was spiritualized. Despite ingenuity, medieval architecture never fully conquered the cold. Great halls with roaring hearths created spectacle, but their warmth barely reached beyond a few feet. Bedrooms with narrow windows and thick walls trapped dampness as much as heat. Even tapestries, carpets, and hangings, though beautiful, are only partial solutions. By the late Middle Ages, some advances appeared. Chimneys allowed better smoke control and more efficient fires. Glazed windows, though rare, cut drafts. But until the invention of modern heating centuries later, even kings and queens shivered at night. The castle remained a fortress against invaders, not against the weather. Interestingly, many myths and ghost stories emerged from the freezing nights of medieval castles. People lying awake in the dark, half dreaming in the cold, reported visions of spirits, demons, or witches. The creak of timber in icy air, the moan of wind through arrow slits, or the sudden crack of frost splitting stone could sound like whispers or cries. For a society deeply religious and superstitious, these nightly terrors were proof of the supernatural. Cold didn't just shape survival, it shaped imagination. Perhaps the most striking legacy of medieval cold was how it highlighted inequality. A noble wrapped in ermine beneath a canopy bed experienced winter very differently from a servant curled in straw on a damp floor. Warmth itself was a privilege, a marker of wealth and power. To be able to buy warmth through furs, fires, or servants tending braziers was to set yourself above the masses. The poor froze while the rich endured more comfortably. The cold was not an equalizer. It was a divider. Today, central heating and insulated homes mean we rarely fear winter nights. But medieval sleep reminds us of a truth. Human beings adapt. They adapted with furs and fire, with straw and animals, with nightcaps and resilience. They built rituals, diets, and even spiritual meaning around the act of simply not freezing to death. Every shiver was a reminder of fragility. Every breath of frosty air was proof of survival. So, how did people sleep in medieval castles without freezing to death? They didn't always succeed. Many froze, many fell ill, many lived lives shortened by the damp and the cold. But those who endured did so with layers of fur, fire, food, animals, and community. The castle was cold, yes, but it was never silent. Fires crackled, dogs stirred, children whispered beneath covers, and servants shuffled to feed the flames. Life clung to warmth in every form it could find. The answer, then, is not one invention or one secret. It was resilience itself, human determination to survive, night after frozen night. And in that resilience lies the twisted beauty of the medieval world. A people who found ways to live, laugh, dream, and sleep, even in the grip of endless cold.